Perfect start to a sermon, right there. I'm guessing most of us, somewhere along the line, have had a teacher who inspired us, encouraged us, got us committed to seeing the world in a clearer way and who we're supposed to be in it, that kind of thing, right? Sometimes it's an actual classroom teacher, maybe a subject that we loved, that we came to love more, maybe a subject we hated that we realized was good. Maybe it was a coach, maybe a Sunday school teacher. That happens sometimes, Haley. It does, yeah. But the best teaching in our life of faith is good not because of the skills of the person. It's because it's that authoritative teaching of Jesus that comes through. That's when teaching is strong. That's kind of what this gospel points out to us today. Here's Jesus early on in his ministry. He shows up in the synagogue, as he's wont to do, and he starts teaching. And you'll notice, for the evangelist here, the content of his teaching is irrelevant. The gospel doesn't tell us Jesus started teaching about this particular scripture passage or this particular issue. He just started teaching, and what happened to people? They were astounded. This was powerful teaching. This was teaching that changed lives. This was teaching that helped people understand who God was and who they were. It was teaching with authority, not like the scribes. And that's true of the best teaching we have in the church. It's a means by which that authoritative teaching of Jesus comes through. We can have, and we do, don't we, all kinds of degrees and certificates and all these things. They don't amount to a hill of beans if we're not trying to get clear for ourselves and for others what Jesus is doing in our lives. So I want to talk about one of those people in my life who taught that way for me ever so briefly. Here's the cool thing. This man, John, wasn't a classroom teacher, wasn't a coach, wasn't a Sunday school teacher. Are you ready for this? He was a member of the vestry. Really? Of the parish I first served, St. John's Cathedral in Denver, when I was in college. And I was sitting at a vestry meeting, as I'm kind of starting an internship there, learning about the church. I'm sitting in a vestry meeting at 20 years old, probably with this deer-in-the-headlights look, as they were talking about budgets and stewardship and annual pledge drives and all these kinds of things. And I'm sure I had a look like, I have no idea what any of this is. I've always gone to church. It's always meant something to me. Feel like I might need to be more a part of it. So I'm here learning about this. I imagine John could see this look on my face. So after the meeting, he comes up and he says, James, I think you and I need to talk. I want to talk to you about all this. I want you to learn about this and what it means. I said, great, super. So we sat down, John and I, at age 20, having grown up in the church I had, with kind, generous parents who did not talk to me once about money, about giving to the church, about any of those things. God bless them. Never discussed it. So John says, James, let's talk about some basic things here. You know, the nature of this relationship we have is that when we know God fully, we know that God made us, beautifully created us, that there is intended to be a wholeness and integrity for us of body, mind, and spirit. That if we're living fully in this faith, we know the fullness of love that conquers all the fear, all the shame, all the guilt that we might ever have in our life. When we know God fully, when we follow Jesus, that love covers all of that. And the third thing is, when we're following Jesus fully, we have a call on our lives. We have a purpose. We have meaning that we cannot have apart from that. That's how it works. He says, if you really want to be the full person God made you to be, he said, it's time to commit. This is how we do it. When we're part of a church, when we're part of a community that in which we experience, even if we get a little glimpse of that love, we come to recognize that actually all that we have isn't ours. It's God's. And it's only ever going to be of the greatest value to us when we order our lives around that fact. Then we can come to know that integrity of body, mind, and spirit, the fullness of that love, and that amazing purpose and call that God has. And so he explained very practically, now let me tell you how the church functions. He says, we only can do the things we're doing because people like you and me fund it. So he went from very spiritual, conceptual things to very practical dollars and cents. And he said, it gets funded, and we can make plans to do things like youth ministry, which you love, James, because people make a commitment and they say, here's what I'm going to give to the church this year. And then they, over the year, give it. And the church then can make a budget, and the church then can commit with boldness and confidence and joy to serving God in all kinds of amazing ways. I thought, that's how it works. I just figured the money magically appeared. I honestly did not know how it worked. Churches function, lights get turned on, singers sing, children have a place to go because we live this life together. I realized after this conversation with John, I really had three choices before me at that point. One was, I could decide that I didn't really believe all this and walk away, except that I did believe it. That could conceptually be a choice, but it wasn't for me. I knew that love of God, and I wanted more of it every day. I came to realize, actually, nothing else mattered more than that. Nothing else mattered more than knowing and sharing that love of God. So walking away wasn't an option. So then it left me with two options. First one being, I could continue to be here and participate and live off the largesse of others. I could continue to live in this illusion that there are people who have a whole lot more than I do and have for generations and will make this all happen for me. Won't that be nice? Or I could join in the mission of God fully and myself make a financial commitment and a time commitment to serve God in the church. But those were really, for me, the choices at the time. And I realized, I looked around, and John helped me look around and see all these people, and it wasn't a few very, very prosperous people funding the whole thing. It was everyone making their commitment to God to make that church what God was calling it to be. And I realized, actually, I only had that one choice. I had to make that commitment. So I did. I got a pledge card. I was in college, mind you, working very, very part-time, trying desperately to go to school, though I never let classes get in the way of more important things. I always worked through college, so I had fun. So I think I pledged something like $30 a month or $50 a month or something like that. At the time, that felt like a huge commitment. So I filled out the pledge card, and I turned it in. It felt amazing. It did not feel safe, mind you. I turned that in and I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? Can I actually do this? To be clear, it also did not feel irresponsible. It felt neither irresponsible to do that, nor safe. Somewhere in between was this place that I had settled on how I was going to begin the stewardship of my life in service to God. And what it forced me to do, what it caused me to do when I sat and wrote that check every month. By the way, this was so long ago, I haven't written a check in like 20 years, but in that time, I was actually, for those of you who are younger, checks were these things we used to write to make payments to things. It was actually on paper with a pen and you signed it. And even more than that, you put it in an envelope, a stamp on the envelope, and put it in the mail. I don't do that anymore. But I did. And so I would write that check, and I realized if I'm going to do this, I have to make sure that I have everything else ordered well to meet my other commitments also. So when I started pledging, you know what else I started doing? Budgeting. Oh my gosh, this was great. Because that enabled me to be a faithful steward of everything I had. I realized that that pledge, making and fulfilling that pledge, wasn't, I give that and now it's no one else's business what I do with the rest. I make that gift so that I can see that everything I do is in faithful service to God. The vacation I take, the beautiful new tie that I buy. I don't buy ties, but you know what I mean. Things like that. Even those things are part of our stewardship to God. That was a lot of years ago, and it's been a wonderful journey ever since. And I know you think it's easy for a priest to say, I know that the more I commit, the more I know that integrity of body, mind, and spirit, the more I experience that profound love of God, and the more I know that I am called to serve God in everything I do. And I know you're going to say, well, it's the priest. He has to say that. He's after our money. And I'll tell you what someone else taught me about that. The answer when someone says, oh, James, you're only after my money, is to say, you're right. I am. And I'll tell you why. Because Jesus said, and he's right about this, as he is about most things, Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What we really want in this place, we want every single person's heart fully committed to a life and community together. I long for that. I dream about that. I weep about that. I absolutely do. It's not just, about a budget. It's about a sense of shared mission and life. This is how we live our life, friends. There's no other way to do it. We can talk about practical things, and Edward will be happy that I am. We can't turn on lights. We can't restore an organ. We can't provide pizza for our youth. We can't feed hungry people on Tuesdays and Saturdays if you and I don't have our hearts fully in this together. And that starts, it doesn't end with, it starts with making that pledge. We actually have paper pledge cards. We could still use a pen and paper and put it in the mail, thank God, because some of us still do these things, Haley.
I'm old school like that, too.
You're old school like that. I did mine electronically. It was much easier. Got on the website, filled it out, set up an automatic payment for my bank account because I know I'm not going to not make my pledge. So I just set it up automatically, and then I do my budgeting online, and it works great. But however you do it, I want your heart here. I do. I am not going to apologize for that. That's why you've called me here. And the first step to getting our hearts fully in this together, to this amazing life that God has given us and God is calling us to expand, is to jump in somewhere between irresponsible and safe, that place where we go, oh my gosh, this feels right. And I'm part of this community. That's stewardship.